Hello, all. This is Dr. Dave Maslach talking to you about reciprocity.com. The E is written with a 3. And in this particular video, I want to talk about the doctoral lifestyle and just 5 PhD problems that we all have to deal with, and perhaps some solutions that I have come across or that I try to do myself. So if you don't know me, I'm a professor of innovation strategy and entrepreneurship, and I created this whole reciprocity project to give back as much as I possibly can. There were so many people that helped me out to get through a PhD program, to get through graduate school, that I wanted to pay the favor forward. So I created this sort of sharing economy proofreading app. That's the whole reciprocity thing, which is a total work in progress. It's still we're working through stuff. And then I'm doing these YouTube videos to help you out. So, many people actually think that doing a PhD or doing the doctoral lifestyle is something that's really ideal. When they sort of fantasize about this, you get to wake up whenever you want, you get to eat anytime throughout the day, because nobody's telling you one way or the other. That there is just a lot of sort of flexibility, and you can kind of do whatever you want to do. And a lot of people think that that is truly an amazing thing. However, there is a lot of difficulties with that. And if you're thinking of doing a PhD or becoming a PhD, or, going to become a professor or anything like that, going and working in a research institute, these are some of these issues that you have to deal with on a regular basis that I've learned to deal with myself. So I'm hopefully going to, give you some of the solutions that I've had to deal with, and I see on a regular basis with a lot of people. So the first one is just not knowing where to begin with your PhD project or the project that you're working on. I see this a lot actually with new PhD students, and part of it is just not feeling comfortable with being an expert in a particular area. But once you actually have learned enough, and you have to learn enough, maybe it is a month, maybe it's 2 months of some particular topic, you could probably start writing about it and start getting a little bit deeper into that. But my solution to this, to feel when you're feeling overwhelmed with not knowing what to do, is just look to see at what you spend most of your time on, or things that are kind of close to you, or things that you fantasize about. So, whatever it is, it could be anything. It could be wildly interesting stuff that you fantasize about, right? So maybe it is going to Malaysia or something like that. Well, then start working on a project about Malaysia. And then you just kind of want to start digging deep into that particular topic until, at one point it just doesn't make sense to you and you kind of get bored of that topic. But you want to just look for things that you spend time on, look for things that you spend, your effort on. And the vast majority of the problems that we work on across all fields is actually, we get inspiration from just things that we see around us and that we see on a regular basis. So you're not looking for some big grand thing, but you're looking for something that's practical and that is meaningful to you. The reason why, because that's everyday life. That's what we're trying to work out, is things on everyday life, right? So if you see, for example, a mud puddle, well, there's probably some really cool bacterial stuff that happen in a mud puddle, and you just have to look at it. There's actually some really cool chemical engineering that happens on that, particularly if you think of thin films. There's a whole science on thin films, which is maybe there's a little bit of oil on the top of that mud puddle, and you want to think about how that actually works and the science behind it. It's kind of interesting, right? You can look at all sorts of things like that. I'd encourage you to look at that and sort of dig deep into that stuff. So the second thing is just not knowing what your boundaries are in a PhD. This is something that we all grapple with and we all struggle with. And there's kind of the predominant response is that you either work on something a lot and spend a tremendous amount of hours on it, and then after that, the sort of second component is that you tell everybody how much you work on this, because you're uncertain about how much you should be working. And so you have to broadcast to everybody about this, how many hours you're working on, because it sort of shows that you're an Iron Man. Kathleen Kellogg at MIT has some really cool research on surgeons and sort of what's happening in the medical field in terms of physicians on, how they grapple with this particular problem. And she called it the Iron Man. I really love it. I love that analogy and the story behind it. You could check out some of her work. It's Kellogg at MIT. Anyways, the idea is with this is that because we kind of have a lot of sense of uncertainty about how much we should actually work, that most people feel that they should be working all the time and that they should be putting in 80, 90 hours. Well, that's not sustainable in the long run. Okay, so it's sustainable for a very, very small fraction of the population that can do that. The vast majority of the people can't in our society. Maybe if the society prioritized resources in that sort of way, then it would make sense. And a lot of people could do that, but we just don't do that. We also have things like babies that we have to make as human beings, right? We have things like we have to brush our teeth, we have we have to feed ourselves. All of those things take away from that optimal sort of pushing ourselves towards working on a particular thing, right? So you have to think about that. And so my suggestion, and it's independent and it's different for everybody, my suggestion for this kind of thing is to set boundaries for you and to set arbitrary boundaries for you personally and for your family or who you are, and try not to break those particular boundaries. So it might be that you don't work on a Sunday, for example. It might be that you don't, that you take a lunch every day, you take a lunch break every day. It might be that you don't answer your door and you dedicate some time to yourself to do some work, right? So you just close down your door for 4 hours. It's actually great research on this at Harvard that looked at this called the time famine, really cool stuff. You can look at that as well. But basically what they did is I think it was a professional services firm. I'm blanking, I know who it is, but I'm blanking on the name. I apologize if to the person that did this research. Anyways, they just gave people time where they just blocked out a certain amount of time at their office, and it was like 4 hours where nobody answered the door, and the productivity increased dramatically from doing that. And it's just because we're kind of trying to respond to a lot of people and doing things like that, and just making sure that we don't feel that time famine is really important stuff. So just setting boundaries for yourself is really important. It's going to seem arbitrary. They are arbitrary because they're things that you make up, but they're for you and they work for you, however it makes your life work. That's an important thing. So the third thing that I see with this dealing with emotions, everything that we deal with on a regular basis, it's like work, and you're dedicating a tremendous amount of resources on this particular topic, and you're the only one that's doing it. Nobody else is doing that. So it's pretty emotional, right? And especially when people are giving you feedback, and it takes a long time, and everybody has these emotions when you get feedback. Negative emotions, you get very positive emotions. It's really true. This will happen to you. And just know that what you're trying to do is deal with sort of the emotional component of it. And so know that that's going to happen to you and try to respond to it accordingly. I know I'm sort of talking about sort of meta stuff, but know that there's an emotional component to it and try to deal with it sort of in a meta way, right? So when you're feeling emotional, dedicate some time to feeling negative emotions, right? So positive emotions, fine, right? Everybody loves those kind of things. But the negative ones, dedicate some time when you're feeling emotional to go do something. Maybe it's going for a jog or going for a walk. Those kind of things really do make a difference whenever you feel really down. Just go do that kind of stuff. Or maybe you need a certain time in the morning to go do some exercise. But force yourself whenever you're feeling those emotions, to do something that makes you smile, and force yourself to smile, especially in sort of tense situations or tense meetings. It's hard to do, but it's going to benefit you a lot. That's an important thing. The other thing is, so the fourth thing that ends up happening a lot is people believe that other people will do their work for them. So they'll get into arrangements. Maybe they'll do in a co-author relationship where they're trying to get other people to work for them. Or maybe it is that, that you're thinking you're the PhD student, you're thinking that your supervisor is going to do all the work, or maybe it's somebody else that's going to do all the work. It doesn't happen that way. You actually have to do the work. So I would suggest that you just make this sort of part of your life to do this work on a regular basis. And in the long run, it's going to pay off if you're doing that. And just know that you just have to do your work. And that's just part of what the life is. There's no kind of sneaky ways to getting around this in terms of networking and stuff like that. It's just what we have to do. And that is totally fine. That's your life. And then the fifth thing that I see in terms of doctoral lifestyle that I think is it's kind of crazy. We all deal with this kind of stuff, and everybody deals with this kind of stuff. And it doesn't matter if you're doing a PhD or not. But this is tend to see this a lot more, and there's a lot of popular culture about it. But just people taking not care of themselves in many different ways. And the reason is we're thinking about this in kind of probably the wrong way. In terms of optimizing on performance, your short-term performance, and that you want to publish as much as you can in a short amount of time. Yes, that's great. And what you're doing is people will push back, brushing their teeth or combing their hair, getting haircuts. I do that. I don't brush my teeth every day, but sometimes I'll push back getting a haircut or something like that because you're focused on getting some project done, or push back eating. Things like this is very real, and it does happen to all of us that we do this kind of stuff. Or you might eat very unhealthy for a long time, or you won't go to a dentist for a very long time, but what you're thinking about it totally wrong because you're trying to optimize on performance. What you should be optimizing on or thinking about is this is a risk reduction game, in that you're optimizing on survival and you're trying to reduce the risk of some bad thing happening so that you can survive longer, to allow you to perform at a certain level, right? So there's a component of performing, and you have to optimize on that. But there's also a component of minimizing the risk that you have so that you can survive longer at the game of being a PhD, or, being a professor or an academic or something like that. So you have to look at is, okay, so you don't brush your teeth. Well, what does that mean in 15 years? You're probably going to lose all your teeth, and you might get heart disease, and then you'll be taken out of the game, right? So, or maybe it is that you eat very unhealthy, or you don't do any exercise. That's this is an easy one to not, take care of, but we don't do any exercise on a regular basis. And then, in a year, you realize that you start getting injuries, and you get stupid little injuries that take you out for a long time, that prevent you from actually doing the work that you should be doing because you're worried about that injury. So you should be trying to making sure that you do things so that you can survive longer at the game and just have fun at the game, rather than sort of optimizing on performance and making sure it's all about sort of efficiency. And this risk reduction thing is a really big thing. It's a big component of business and how we actually do things, but it's also a big component of life that we forget about, right? So risk reduction might be thinking about significant others and worrying about your significant others and stuff like that. That is a really important component of life, and you should be dedicating resources to that, or at least thinking about it as like, whoop, if I don't do this, then something bad is going to happen in the medium to long term, right? And that's an important thing to think about. It's always about sort of the risk of doing a particular action, rather than just optimizing on the performance of that action or the outcome of that action. Okay, so those are the solutions to these problems that we all have to deal with during a doctoral lifestyle. We all have to deal with it. It's totally fine. I'm just trying to make this out in the open, that you're not crazy if you have these kind of issues in any sort of way. But anyways, if you like this video, give me a thumbs up. I do appreciate it. Do take care and have a wonderful day. Bye.